Welcome to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Every week, I'll be sitting down with a sales executive where they'll share their stories and experiences that produce game-changing results. Let's be honest, sales can be a tough game. I'm sure at some point, we've all delivered a less than stellar demo, been ghosted by a client or two, and sometimes, maybe we did more talking than listening. And that's where I can help. The stories and insights our guests share can be applied to your own business, your territory, or with your team, so you're not reinventing the wheel. Our weekly tactics and strategies help you get out of your head and start creating your own path towards game-changing results. Welcome back to the K2 Sales Podcast. I'm your host, Karen Kelly. Now, when you think about the various phases of the sales cycle, I would say most people struggle with the negotiation phase for many reasons. And I had the pleasure of speaking with an expert, Patrick Tinney, who is a 3-time author of Unlocking Yes, and that's the revised edition with negotiations focused, Perpetual Hunger, and the bonus round. And Patrick shared his insights and experience from his 30-year career in sales and media. And a lot of it is, you're looking for this magic bullet. And when you listen to this and you take notes and you hear what he's saying, is it comes down to, the core elements of who we are as people and how we like to be treated. And a lot of the words he used was, building trust. How can we build trust? And in order to do that, how can we be transparent? How can we be honest? If we've made a mistake or an error, how do we correct it? Again, all fueling back to building trust so that people feel safe and comfortable doing business with you. Integrity, just doing the right thing. Like, that is such an underused card these days. And it comes back to your moral compass is why am I doing, if I'm a sales leader, why am I doing this role? What legacy do I want to leave behind as an individual contributor? Like, why did I come into sales? Why am I working with this company? It's integrity is doing the right thing when no one's looking. And so how can you bring that into your negotiations? Knowing your customer, knowing what they're going to come back with, and really just a lot of times, even with our sales process, we're looking inward and we're understanding what we do, but have we considered the other person's their perspective? What are their thoughts? What are their walkaway points? Why are they keep asking this? Like, what do you think is contributing to this? And really getting the emotion and the impetus behind why this ask, so that you're dealing with the root cause and not just symptoms. And so he shared a lot of strategies, a lot of stories about how to just get in front of that, and even being aware of what sometimes these tactics are played against us, unfortunately, but just pausing in the moment and saying, like, what's actually going on here? And when something is going on, calling it out, like, just like what the elephant in the room, like labeling it and calling it out. So all of a sudden your customer realizes this is a sophisticated seller, like it's not going to work for them. So definitely encourage you, if you're a small business owner, an individual contributor, take a listen. And I would invite you to look at ways in your own business that perhaps you're doing some of these things, or, alternatively, are these things being done to you? And if they are, how can you become more aware? How can you get in front of them? Because it's hard to unring that bell. For sales leaders, great opportunity for you to role play some of these and really, take some account specifics and really dissect them as to the various personas, what's important for them, what is likely, the most likely and the least likely plays or plans for your prospect, and really coming prepared, both from a knowledge standpoint, but also that mindset. And he says when he walked into a room, he's like, I got this, I'm owning it. And that level of confidence and conviction is so important and it's so powerful. And even people talk about these power poses, like, what are you doing before you go into that? So you have a sense of belief that you're not leaving anything on the table. You're not going there to, it's not a zero-sum game when that I win and you lose, but how can you just really negotiate in a way that, you're meeting all your criteria, but you're also helping them achieve their goal? So encourage you to take a listen. If you apply any of these or you become aware based on what he said, let us know. We love to celebrate the wins. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. So in the B2B selling environment, I would say when you look at the various stages that most people struggle in that negotiation phase. And I'm delighted to be speaking with, I would say, major expert in this field, Patrick Tinney, on all things negotiation. So Patrick, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Feeling rev today? Feeling like
Oh,
George St. Pierre. Want to roll up the sleeves. Let's go.
we're gonna we're gonna UFC. We're gonna do some fighting here.
That's
We
right.
can do some negotiating, right? Hopefully,
Yeah.
negotiations aren't ending in the ring. If so, we might be doing it all wrong. So I want to just start a quick backup as to you spent many years in media in Canada, and you now run a Centroid marketing and training. And I'm just curious, kind of what propelled you out of the media to say I'm going to go into really focus in sales and marketing, but more specifically negotiations. Did you find a gap? Was there something that you continually saw people struggling with, or kind of what was the impetus for you to do what you're doing today?
Yeah, it really comes down to this. I applied for a directorship at Can West and went in with a plan to smash three departments together with a 12-page PowerPoint. And the senior vice president looked at me and said, I've never seen this before. I've heard about it. I've never seen it. He says, you get the job. And I said, well, that's great. The only problem is it's not a directorship, it's a vice presidency. And if I don't get that and all the trimmings, you don't get me. So you can see why my career ended rather abruptly then. But I was 49, and I was sitting at home with my knitting, and I was staring at a blank wall, and I said to myself this very question, which you've just asked: what is the hole in the market? And when I got examining what
Mhm.
I'd been through in my roughly 3 decade career in corporate sales, was a lack of understanding about negotiation from a corporate point of view. So you'd say, well, Pat, of course, people that are entering the business aren't going to be great at it. And what I would tell you is it goes the full length of the fish. It starts from the top of the fish and it goes to the bottom. And I verified this after finishing my book Unlocking Yes, Sales Negotiation Lessons and Strategy. I went out on a 50 book signing tour with Chapters in Indigo here in Canada, largest bookstore in Canada. And I kept asking business people over and over again. And by my guess, it was well over 5,000 people because I was handing out about 250 to 350 business cards per 6 hour session book signing. And I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you see yourself as a negotiator? 10 being the best. And there'd be this pause. And by the way, Karen, you have a number. I don't want to know what your number is, but right now on your forehead, you're visualizing a number. I can tell you that the vast majority of people said I am a 6.5 to 7.5 out of 10 in terms of efficacy and productivity. And I would go, wow, that's fantastic. Congratulations. And they say, thank you. So I said, it sounds to me like you're winning roughly 65 to 70% of all deals you get involved with. And they pause and they go, yeah, that sounds about right. And I go, great. How many negotiation buyer strategies can you name? How do you rate them for buyer risk and seller risk plus time compression? The answer is
Zero.
zero, or one, or blushed face. I had the odd savant who could name two.
Uh-huh.
They're rare.
And
I can name 25.
And is this similar, Patrick, to the reason when you talk about to salespeople, they know their internal process so well, but when you ask them about their buyer's journey and the way in which they buy, their eyes are just deer in the headlight?
Well, I was just listening to some research this morning, whether you believe it or whether you don't believe it, but the buyer's journey is roughly three-quarters finished before they even get to you. Now,
Mhm.
and this is, to me, this is a critical challenge for people because if the buyer kind of says, yeah, we're aligned, but then you get in front of them and they have a totally different vision of your vision, then you've got what is known as an expectation gap, and somehow you have to close that. And this is why you run into situations where you have peripheral buyers. These are buyers that just sit out on the edges of your buyer journey and they wait for you to get weak, and then they go into severe anchoring,
Mhm.
or they wait for you to have such a
Mhm.
surplus of product that they offer you 20 cents on the dollar. So these are kind of what I would call corner case situations, but there's a lot of people in the marketplace who just think that way, and it's part of their culture. And you have to be very careful when you enter corporate settings that you've done your homework on what that culture is. I'll give you an example. So I spent a year of my time on and off getting into one company. I want to be in front of the
Mhm.
CEO, and they did about a half a billion in sales a year. Not big, but measurable, right? And so anyway, I get in there, and all of a sudden, we got schoolyard annex. We got, and they're using negotiation strategies on me that you know, we would use as little kids, and I called them out one by one. Finally, the CEO who's sitting there like Don Corleone is going, "Hey, we better watch out. This guy's analyzing us." He wasn't
He
Italian,
knows
by
what
the
he's
way.
doing.
Well, yeah, and I called them out, and I won't sort of go into identifying them any further than what I realized was I had to get out of there really fast, and I actually created a proposal I knew they couldn't accept.
Mhm.
You see, you can't do a good deal with bad people.
And so what you just said there, Patrick, is 2 things I wrote down is culture, is understanding that culture and even knowing the various players, knowing how they make a decision, how they've negotiated and done things in the past. I think that's important, and I don't know how many people would consider that. And also what you said is calling them out, like, at any point, like, just calling that elephant in the room to say, like, "Hang on a minute," like, and just because I feel that you're taking back the power when you do that.
Oh, you're not taking back the power. You are shocking these people, and I've done it with CEOs because. So here's the salient point for your audience. When you say to somebody, all right, so let's say there's a really cool negotiation strategy called the secondary target. It's where somebody negotiates really hard for one of two products that you're selling. So let's say you've got two products in your ecosystem, could be more, but the two that they're interested in, they negotiate like heckers on the first one that they only partially want, and then they call you out
Mhm.
as mean and unfair, and you're just using your corporate weight to throw me around, and I'm sick about this deal, but I'm going to do it. And then you bring up the second product, which they're really interested in, and they say to you, Karen, you've been so unreasonable in this first round of discourse that if you even bring up what I would consider to be a red herring of a price, just like an at market price, this negotiation comes to a sad end.
Mhm.
No more discussion. Just write up the contract, send it to me, and I will cross out anything I don't like. What they really wanted was the second product all along. And what
Mm.
they've done is
Mhm.
they've convinced you that you took them on the first round and they were disgusted with you on the second round. And I loved when I would see this and I would go, "Oh, that's poetic. That is so uh, that's so Michelangelish." I mean, it's Da Vinci, because you can see it coming,
Yeah,
but you have to know what it is to recognize it.
yeah. But see, you're aware of that. Yeah, and that's the thing, you're aware of that, but imagine the power you get when you can see it because some people might just be unaware and lack of experiences, that's what they were doing. They were doing a scare tactic to really, front load the first one, knowing that the second one was the one they wanted. And I think that part of it is just being aware of like that's what we're going to talk about today, like potential strategies and what they could be doing, but also be going in there and having done your homework and knowing your worth, knowing your walk away point, and also having calculated your profitability, saying like this isn't unreasonable. This is and pushing it on them at some point and be like, well, that's fine. Like this is a no deal then.
I cost model up and cost model down. So I've just developed a new master
Hmm.
class, and I show people how to go both ways because we're in a marketplace right now where prices are going up, and so you have to be able to express those. In some cases, where we've still got a buyer's market where the buyers are pressing prices down. One of the ones that, and when I heard you make that comment about awareness, is it's a negotiation strategy that buyers often use, saying something to the effect of, Karen, you come to me with this product, I want some skin in the game from your side. What are you going to do? What's your
Hmm.
exposure rate? So I've had this put to me by CEOs, and in the training business, of which we're both involved. I said to the one person, actually, I've said it to a couple, but one comes to mind right now. I said, skin in the game. So what does that mean to you? Well, what that means is that you're going to have to prove yourself here. And I go, great, count me in. I want to prove myself.
Mhm.
So let me just break down what your version of skin in the game is so that we both agree what we're talking about here. I think what you're saying is that you want me to come in and spend my money in your company. You'll have a look at my money and decide whether I've made you enough money to pay me back my money, and then eventually give me the money that I deserve because I have helped you either save money or raise sales revenue. So I'm all in, but I only have one condition. And the person says, the condition is? I said, well, you peel your books open once every 4 weeks so I can look at the gains by sales representatives so that we can both agree what I'm really worth. At which point they tell me to go
Boom.
boomba. That's when the
Yeah. So
and so I said that's fine. So we understand each other. You're uncomfortable with your side of the proofing, so I'm fine with that. So what's your backup strategy? Now that we both disagree on that one. And you know what the answer is? Zero.
mm,
They don't have one. And they sit
mhm.
there and they
Yeah.
get really frustrated. They go, you know, this guy's just sitting here analyzing us. I don't feel silence. You know, you want to work with dream clients. And
Mhm.
to me, the dream clients are the ones that visualize change because they realize that living with the status quo is hurting them. It's hurting them. And if they don't understand their own pain points, then what they've got is a very expensive hobby, which eventually goes bankrupt. See, the visionaries in business uh, regularly visit the skill sets of the people in their companies. And I actually think right now through the pandemic, I think there's a lot of CEOs sitting there going, gulp, because you're seeing the number of companies who are kind of marking down right now in the stock market. They're kitchen sinking. They're going back and retooling right now. And once a group of corporations see another group of corporations do it, then they all kind of do it because it's
Mhm.
their chance to go in and reclaim profitability without buying their own shares back. They just remove bodies and they go through a right sizing again. And you'd say, well, Pat, what does that have to do with negotiation? It happens at the buying level because that allows them to put more pressure on their buyers to say, hey, we're cutting bodies in here to save money, so you better be saving money at the negotiation table.
And think about the various personas like procurement. I mean, they're incented on that, right? The harder they squeeze, the more they make.
Yeah, but here's the problem with procurement. Okay, so they report to buyers. The buyers sort of say, all right, so here's a few people that I'm interested in. You use whatever strategies you want. And one of the worst is kind of like it's a reverse auction. So it's survival of the fittest, right? You go through rounds and rounds of cutting prices, right? Now here's the problem with that. Let's say that we're operating a network like you and I are on here right now. Only there's hundreds of thousands of people attached to it, and the price gets so low that the people in the company who actually service the account lose interest in it because there's no
Mhm.
profit.
Yeah.
Is procurement going to answer the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning or the buyer?
Mhm.
Procurement isn't. And so here's the answer
Mhm.
to that problem. So if it gets to the point where procurement starts to really press on your soft parts, dare I say, and we all have them, uh, you just kind of lean over and you say, so who's the ultimate user of this network? Well, it's Karen. Well, would Karen accept this kind of quality that I'm going to have to? Because what we're doing is we're now affecting the quality triangle. Because if
Yeah.
quality is being reduced by price or it's being accelerated in time, then something's got to give. Would Karen accept
Mhm.
that? Well, I'm not sure Karen would accept that, but that's not her job. I said, well, it is her job. You better get her in here and ask her, because if she is the recipient of the kind of quality that you just forced us to deliver, then you're going to have to explain it to her in real time. What do you think, Tim?
Tim's gonna get the way you said Tim was with complete disdain there.
Well, he's a Timbit.
But Pat, it what you're doing here is the level of confidence and certainty and conviction by a few things you said, even that defining skin in the game. And my only thing here is how can you teach a 24-year-old to take this level of conviction and not even pushing back, just like calling things out because they're so confident and certain in themselves and their product. And just like you said, if you're going to push this, something else is going to give because you can't have all three. And so I feel that when I started my career at 24, like I was the one that's getting beat up by Tim because I was like, okay, okay. And now, I know better. I'm more confident and sure, but I feel that there's still that, like, seller versus buyer mentality, and they just get pushed down, and the seller can't kinda come back up.
That's correct. So you've just kind of it reminds me of the cartoon. There's the three roofing nails on the roof, right? And there's three of them, and they're all looking at each other in a bubble. And then in the next caption, there's only two. And the one roofing nail turns to the other and says, "What just happened?" He says, "I don't know. All I heard was bang, and he was gone." So,
You got
we can't
nailed.
be like that in sales.
Yeah.
Yeah, he got nailed. We can't be like that in sales. I mean, so one of the big problems I see in sales at all levels is the willingness to take on positive risk and the willingness to kind of say I'm wrong. Because here's the problem. Karen, here's the problem. It comes down to this. One of the most important hiring questions anybody should ever ask is, what's the worst client situation you've ever been in that's just been absolutely devastating, that you made right with the client to the point where it was not only right, you grew the relationship. And if the person doesn't have a story, then there's one of two things. One, they have no positive risk profile, or number two, they're just not telling the truth, because we all make
Mhm.
mistakes. And if you're not willing to make mistakes, then you're not a risk taker. And if you're not a risk taker, why would I want you on my team?
So talk to us about
And I'm
what
talking about
positive
positive risk.
what is positive risk for those listening?
So in negotiation, there's two kinds of risk. There's negative risk. And so negative risk is where you've done your homework on the client, and there are some things that you just don't bring up with that client. You just sort of say, all right, so they don't like to talk about union agreements.
Mhm.
Don't talk about union agreements. They don't like to talk about uncertainty of commodity prices. Well, you can't talk about that. I mean, you just have to wait until it pops up. Look at the price of lumber. Look at the journey it's been on in the last year or so. I mean, it's really been through quite the time. So we don't talk about those things. But on the positive side, positive risk is where we walk in and we say, this proposal, this incentive plan that I am placing in your hands is so de-risked. It is so smart for your company. It is so easily worded so that when I leave you, you can take this proposal and incentive plan, take it home to your family first, and explain to them what you bought. Now, if they don't understand it, then you got a problem, because the next thing you have to do is to take it to your senior management team internally and say, all right, so if we don't buy this, we're looking silly. And what happens if one of our main competitor buys us, and for a period of time they have an advantage, a competitive advantage in the marketplace that we could have owned? And one
Mhm.
of the places this happens, and you're coming from the medical sales side of the business, is when new products come to market. Do you want to be the last doctor in the room to try it? Or do you want to be one of the guys that says, you know what, I've got great patients, I do great research, I've seen all of the level one, two, three testing, we've seen the outcomes, we've measured the risk, I feel really good about that, let's put it into play.
And what I love about that, Pat, is just coming back to Matt Dixon's work on the jolt effect, 60% in B2B deals end in no decision because they can't make a decision. And so what you're doing is how can we de-risk it? How can we empower them to make them confidently make a decision. So, just like what you said here, the positive risk is that they're afraid of messing up. But when you can spell it out and you can make such a compelling reason to change, make it, I think the big thing is even in universally understood language that you don't have to bring in a complete legal team too early, that they can go back and they understand what they're actually dealing with. And so how can you make it easy for them? I think that's part of the battle.
And it's a huge part of the battle. So when I wrote my books, coming from a newspaper background, I was very uh, cognizant of writing at the grade 11 level to
Mhm.
describe some of the most complicated negotiation concepts in the world. My primary market is not Canada and the United States; it's actually India.
Mm.
And I thought when I wrote my book, I thought, this first one, I thought, let's write it so that perhaps English is a second language, but universally, English is the language that everybody prefers to communicate in, especially when writing things like contracts.
Talk to us about, I'd like people at the end of this discussion to leave here with two things. One, the ability to recognize kind of what's being played upon them, if anything, because what you said is when you're aware of it, but you can label it, it completely disarms the other person. And they're like, okay, I guess this isn't going to work on them. So I think if we can make them more aware of what's being done to them, one, and also, how can they avoid, because it's hard to unring that bell. So how can they kind of prepare to not get into those situations? So is there two or three strategies that you see that are common that B2B or even landmines that B2B sales folks fall into?
Yeah, the one that I have the greatest disdain for, actually, well, two. One I mentioned is the reverse auction, which I think is a value destroyer. But the other one is used so often in the real estate business to pressure um, uh, people to come to agreements that they otherwise wouldn't come to, and that's let's split the difference. It's garbage. If the person says let's split the difference and they're the first one to do it, they have the greatest advantage because they've already calculated what it is they're going to have to
Mm-hmm.
give in order to get. And I think people who are pretty intelligent and understand the whole idea of presenting price, presenting value equation, presenting hidden value, and presenting things like super differentiators. I really think that there's a level of confidence that comes with that. So you'd say, well, how do I get that information? Back to the 24-year-old. So um, I'm going to be high self-interest here for just a second. Uh, this is Unlocking Yes, the revised edition. At the back of this book are 25 negotiation strategies that I've deconstructed in very, very, very simple language. The book, by the way, is recommended by Brian Tracy, Jeb Blunt, Deb Calvert, Professor Seth Freeman of the Stern School of Business, Columbia University, and James Muir, who wrote The Perfect Close. Not a bad team on the back. The other way is, quite frankly, I think I'm one of the few guys or gals, we'll call us gals, guys for a second, peoples, who have spent a lot of time studying strategy. I love it. I was meant to do this. So I've written some great programs very early in my career. Like my first client was KPMG. Now my wife happened to work there, but I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't sell to her team. I had to sell up into her management group because of the kind of distinct culture that they have. It's on the up and up. I also negotiated with the WalMarts of the world, Walmart head office. I did it for over a decade. So I've spent a lot of my life trying to figure out how to lay the planks on a bridge that creates the greatest amount of trust so that people can call you aside for those very, very, very special meetings. They're almost off-site meetings. I've had Walmart people call me for off-site meetings. They're not supposed to do it, but they trusted me that much. And I think the other thing, by the way, is, you know, in the world of mistakes, they aren't really mistakes. A mistake is when somebody dies. An error is nothing more than an iteration that has been caught, it's been opened up, And if you made an error, get to the client in inside 24 hours, expose it to your management team, and say, hey, let's get together. I would rather point out the problem and bring it to you, and let's just sit and solve it. We'll redial the contract. Everybody goes back to doing what they do best, and that is customers have to create new customers, and sellers have to create new sellers and new customers.
And so you mentioned trust there, and then trust kind of led to transparency. Really, if there is an error done, how do you get in front of it and really continue to strengthen that bond or that trust? What are you seeing in terms of are people taking the time to build trust when they're in negotiations, or are they kind of just scheming over it and trying to get to that signature?
Um, well, the smart ones are trying to build trust. The people that are high self-interest are trying to be transactional. So you'd say, well, what's your idea of a big mistake, Pat? Well, I made an $800,000 mistake with the Hudson's Bay Company, and I figured it out. It was in the middle of the contract signing, and I went into my team and I said, I think we're going to bank $800,000 that belongs to the Bay earlier in the year than we're going to present it to them. And they said, well, why don't you just hang on, and we'll let we'll let the error kind of play out over time. And by the way, Pat, you're going to be a hero. You're going to walk in with a check for $800,000 at the end of the year on a $13 million contract. And I just said to my boss at the time, I said, I don't see it that way. So it's January
Mhm.
up here in Canada, which, as you know, is very tropical. And I had my full length, I had my full length winter coat on, and I went for a really long walk in the snow. And I asked myself two questions: why am I in sales? And number two, how am I going to explain this to my son in the future? That dad was
Mm.
feckless. That's not what I'm here for.
Mhm.
And I exposed the mistake. I went
Yeah.
down to the bay and I said, I got to meet you. I said, it's important. They said, okay, we'll meet you up in the cafeteria at Queen and Dundas. Queen, no, sorry, Queen and York. And so anyway, we went up and I sat down. I said, I got bad news and I want to apologize. He goes, oh no. And I said, yeah. I said, it's big. He's how big? I said, $800,000. He goes, oh no. I said, here's the deal. We're going to give it to you. It's just that it would happen later in December rather than give it to you evenly throughout the year. He goes, you're kidding me. I went, no. Oh, Pat, thank God. Thank God you've done this. And I said, why? He said, first of all, he says, just fix it up. Whatever it is, fix it up. Bring it back into me. Help me understand it. And he says, I'll just take it back in my people and just say, we had to do a little cleanup here. I said, now what's this part about, thank God? He said, can you imagine if we'd got to the end of the year and suddenly I'm sitting on so much outerwear, I'm sitting on so many pairs of leggings and gloves and toques, and all of a sudden you walk in with $800,000 and I have to discount all of this merchandise because nobody's going to buy it at any price when I could have bought full pages all the way through and moved it at a much higher profit. They would have killed me.
Mhm.
And you know what happened after that? So we got bought by Hollinger, and the first thing the Hollinger gang did was cut staff by 20%. I get a call. It's my friend at the bank. He never
Mhm.
calls me. I call him, right? Second largest account in the company. And he said, Pat, how you doing? I said, I don't know. I said, you're reading the same newspapers I'm reading. What do you think? And he goes, I don't know. But he says, you don't have to worry. I said, why? He said, if anything happens to you, he says, you'll be working in 3 days based on my call on the marketplace. Our budget annually is
Mm.
$100 million. I think people will listen to me based on the kind of integrity that you've shown.
Integrity for the win.
Do you know what? Integrity is doing the right thing when nobody's looking, and when you do it
Yeah.
when you're down to your skivvies and you realize. So for me, that was career defining.
Yeah. Well, you held the mirror to yourself. You had a moral compass. Even those people who don't have a son, I think it's so important to pause in that moment and say, like, there's short-term gains and there's long-term, but above all that, like, what's the right thing to do and why did I get into this profession in the first place? And I don't see a lot of that anymore, and it's sad. So it's great to see that you held that and look what it got you in return, in terms of the security with your customer.
Well, there's that for sure, and it was the fun after it was all over. So when he retired and I retired at 49, we get together and play golf, and he'd say, "All right, do you want to know the truth?" And I'd say, "Sure." While you were freaking out, I was freaking out.
Yeah.
We were freaking out in tandem. I remember one time, so when after Hollinger bought us, we went from 16 newspapers to 125 overnight, 7 companies being smashed together. And you got all of these owners who've suddenly become employees who don't like each other. And so I'm the guy that was tasked to sew 5.5 million circulation together into a cognitive, connected language that everybody can understand. Because, think about it. I don't care what business you're in. You could be in the agency business, you can be in the television business. They all fiddle around with terms. And I was tired of it. I said, we're all going to speak the same distribution language. We're going to cut out all the fat. We're going to sew it together properly, and we're going to take it in and we're going to simplify it. And I remember walking into, so the biggest insert distribution conversion in the history of the company was Zellers.
Mhm.
And it was $4 million incremental, one sale.
Mhm.
And I had tagging behind me a senior vice president from Hollinger and a president, I believe, from the Lower Mainland Publishing Group. And I just took over the room. I'd had no sleep. We'd been working on this until 10 o'clock at night. I didn't get home until 11. The meeting was, I think, 7:30 in the morning, and I had an hour and a half commute. So my eyes were bleeding.
Mhm.
And I walked into the room and I thought, you know what? Own it. So I just started walking back and forth. As a matter of fact, I walked and sat behind the credenza where the procurement manager for the Hudson's Bay was sitting, and he spun his chair around sideways and was smiling at me. I could just see him in his mind's eye going, you know what, man? You are not leaving anything on the table here today. And these two guys who probably don't like you, who are probably looking at me going, if Tinney makes one mistake, we are going to slice and dice this guy so badly. He's going to look like he's been through one of those Spätzle machines.
But how many people have that mindset of owning it and just even saying it out loud, like, "I got this." People, I just think they're not doing the amount of work that they need to be doing in terms of preparation prior to going to negotiations.
Wow, is that? Did you ever open up a can of worms there? Thank you. So can you imagine trying to present 125 markets simultaneously? Here's the challenge, and it's not the one you think. It's you have to understand the economics of each one of those communities. So if somebody says to
Mhm.
you, "All right, so Kamloops has got some issues." Yeah, they got cactus there, and you got mountains. And what about Prince George? Oh yeah, Prince George, lots of trees. Yeah, mountain lions, the odd grizzly bear while you're delivering your products. What happens when you get onto Vancouver Island? Sometimes you run out of road. It's all of
Mhm.
these things. And one time I did something really cool. So I don't know if you're familiar with Winnipeg, but most of the Western cities are all connected by rivers. And that's why they came to be,
Mm.
because they were natural places for people to draw water from. They were natural places to bring livestock as they were bringing them to market. And the railways always ran, through these various areas. And so I was trying to convert the business from the Winnipeg Free Press, which was my natural daily friend, but we opened up a distribution system there. And so what I did was, and this was in the days when Wilco was around, so it was the predecessor of Walmart. I said to the local manager
Mhm.
there, I said, we've got to get the buyer up in the air so that he can look down at his stores and look at all of the various bridges that there are in Winnipeg that are causing a lot of congestion in the morning when we're out trying to deliver stuff and our competitors are. And by the way, we're getting into places they can't. And my initial thing was, why don't we get him in a hot air balloon? Because I know this guy's an adventurer. And he looked at me and he said, Pat, he says, can you imagine the insurance implications? I went, bad idea. Okay, what's the secondary idea? He said, small plane. I said, organize it. I don't care what it costs. Got him up in a small plane, looked down, said, that's what they're doing. This is what we're doing. Here's the places we can get into. This is what happens with the flow of traffic in the city. We understand it better than anybody else. We got the business.
Mhm. And, so just to let you know, I did live in Winnipeg for 3 years, so well aware of the Assiniboine and all the rivers and how they're all connected, but what you said there, I drew 2 parallels. One is, in B2B, consensus, whether it's, regions of Western Canada or different personas, like, there's up to 11 buyers making a decision now, so that's one thing that we have to be cognizant of, and also just with what you did, how do you invite your prospect to take a 30,000 view of what's going on, that big picture first, zoom out, and then, once you can show them the smaller things that are, in your instance, the differentiators, they can put those puzzle pieces together. But that, again, that's not happening. So I think that's brilliant the way you did that. And it's something that our listeners can take and just in their own B2B environment, they can put into practice as well.
Ah, come on, you can go buy a balloon in China. You can have whatever you want.
or that, or that, or a
No,
helicopter, or
I think you're exactly right. It's looking at deals as business cases rather than as transactions. You see, you have to understand that people don't want to be sold. That's old. They want
Mhm.
aspirational approaches to selling. And the only time that you bring in a little bit of pain, believe it or not, is in negotiation because it has to have this almost measured, balanced discussion. So you'd say, well, when does pain become relevant? It's when your competitor isn't at the same quality level that you're at. So this is what happens when you get out of brand alignment. So I've always worked for the best products in the marketplace when I could. So my last, number two product was I worked for the Calgary Sun when it first opened back in 1980. After that, it was on to the Toronto Star, and for the last 27 years of my career, I just worked for the A products in the market. And so I always had an advantage from a first of all size and scope, but also the leverage of better research and better understanding of product alignment. And when the products weren't aligned, that's when I knew, Karen, for absolutely sure that you used the term I think before we got on air was sharpening your pencil. I think what happens is that people that use terms like that are uh, they're envisaging that they can make magical things happen by just using a term. To me, that's like using the term fairness,
Mhm.
gender. I've got a list of around 12 words that as soon as you hear them in a corporate negotiation setting, you kind of lean back and you kind of go, all right, first of all, life's unfair. All right. I think we all understand that. And as far as gender goes, women are largely underpaid right now, and we're trying to fix it. At least the people that care. I care.
But what it sounds to me is when you had those and you're working with top tier companies is that you knew what was important to them. And in those instances, it was quality, right? And so that's where you can kind of, how can you create a bit of pain or friction is the cost of inactivity. Well, if it's poor quality, you know that that's going to hurt them, right? And so I think again back to what I sound like is a broken record, but it's just like knowing your customer and having done some homework as to like what's going to move the needle for them, what is really important for them.
I know where you're going, and I agree with you, but it's a calculation. So I agree with you 1,000%. It's a calculation. I remember being at the Toronto Star. So when Byway was still around, which is now like
You're all
your
these names
general.
are dating us because I know Byway.
Oh, I know. You know what?
And
I mean, every company has a great run until it doesn't. I mean, BlackBerry
uh,
wasn't a bad company until a while ago.
uh-huh.
They were the world
It's
leader,
good for security
President of
now.
the United States.
Yeah.
use their product. And then they
Mhm.
decided they needed a hockey team, and that's when the wheels fell off the buggy. But you know, the reality is if you don't deliver what the customer expects, I'll give you an example. Now we got all these Dollar General stores and super discount and all the rest of this stuff, dollar stores, and so that's what the byway was in those days. And uh, so I can remember my team from the Toronto Star going in with an idea to give them extra exposure in, of all things, color comics, because it was one of the few places where we knew we could print color amazingly well. We could always get their film in advance. It would be shipped over to Greater Buffalo Press, and by the way, nobody was going to buy color comics anyway, so we could price it really well for them. And we went in with an augmentation on that, and the buyer was a Harvard MBA, and they were kind of new in those days. And the guy sitting across with us was a bunch of little girls' dresses and bubbles and stacking chairs, with the metal legs, and we're all cramped in a room. And this gentleman, I remember his name clearly, Russ Jacobson, he looks down at the proposal, which my guys were just basically jamming up onto the table, with the usual enthusiasm of somebody who thinks they own the market. And he pauses and he goes, "Gentlemen, look out the window. What do you see?" Well, it's just like right now. It's February, right? So we're looking out the window and the wind's blowing and there's snow, and we're all looking out saying, "Russ, it's terrible out there. It's terrible. We should all be in Miami. We should all be downstairs, with a yellow bird, sitting beside the pool with our fancy, bathing suits, enjoying a good time, and all the rest of it. Look at it out there. It's terrible." Russ says, "Exactly. What do you got out there? You got ice. Look at all the ice out there." We're going, "Yeah, we agree." He says, "That's what this proposal is. You're bringing me ice in the winter. I can go out and chop my own. Don't bring me ice in the winter." Meeting adjourned. We didn't get it right. We were wrong. And I think that when you're wrong, you gotta, this is why we do postmortems on every negotiation we do. One more thing, by the way, and I know we're running short on time here, so I'm going to give you a pro tip here. I've filled my masterclass with pro tips. Here's the pro tip. What if you don't get a deal done? What you do is you ask the person who is you what you do is you become very open about, all right, so the
Mhm.
gap's too far, we can't close it. All right, so we agree on that. So can you describe to me, had we been able to do a deal, what that deal looked like in your mind? And I don't care. Uh, you can say anything. You can deep anchor. You can say all the crazy things in the world you want. I'll just sit here and listen, because I have to know, in case I run into somebody else, with a need similar to yours. So the person just lays it all out and got a big smile on their face, and "I would have had you if you'd done this, 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 and this, da da da, boom, boom."
Mhm.
And you say, "Well, why would you do that, Karen?" Wow, because suppliers can go out of business the next day. Think about Byway going out of business. Who filled those shoes? It's called Bargain Heralds. After Bargain Heralds, who was it? It was the dollar store. So
Mhm.
you might just lose one channel to sell product, realizing the next channel is coming up, realizing you already have the keys to the car because they handed them to you.
Mhm. But you have to ask for them.
You got to ask.
Yeah, but even how many times has the supplier not been able to commit or the relationship severed? I mean, that's happened to me before, and that's why again you can't burn bridges. But when they've told you everything, like that's the golden secret, right? And I think you have to ask that. But also, even if it doesn't turn out in your favor, that information, that knowledge, the language they use, you know exactly what's important to them. How like you can use that on similar customers like them.
Exactly. And so that's just so critical, and I think it's a missed step. It's a missed opportunity. In baseball, if you know people say, "Well, I have to be really good at everything." No, you don't. In baseball, if you can throw a baseball at 100 degrees with at 100 miles an hour, sorry, with great accuracy, does it really matter if you're not the best catcher on the team? So we know that we're not going to close every deal. So if you know you're not going
Hmm.
to close every deal, then build in that part of the equation is you go through your cost modeling and say, all right, so if we get outside of this zone. So I'm one of the few guys that's walked away from Walmart because they got outside of my cost modeling. And I pointed
Mhm.
out to them that, the person that they were going to go and do work with had a waste equation of around 5%. And they said, well, that's okay because they lowered the price by 10%.
Mhm.
So we're still up five. And I'm going, yeah, but the cost of printing, cost of shipping, I'm not sure that you're really coming out that far ahead. And they said, we're willing to take the risk to find out. I
Mhm.
said, there you go. So I'm out. My guys nearly killed me. They thought I was a fool, but I knew he couldn't be profitable below a certain point. 2 or 3 years
Mhm.
later, new president comes in, calls up and says, who did this Walmart deal? I said, it was me. He said, brilliant. Thank God.
Mhm. But that's also long term, like not giving in to that short term win. And even I feel like there's deals I walk away with. I'm like, at this point, it's actually costing me money. That you also have to remove emotion and not be desperate. Because and you kind of have to do that once to get burned and go, I will never do that again. But really having done your calculations and knowing that this doesn't make financial sense. Like I have to walk away. And who knows, in your instance, it did come back in your favor a few years later. But like just that sense of like, no, I'm not going to do that. Like I'm not willing to go that far. It's not worth it to me.
Do you know what it is? It's execution. So if your people realize there's no profit in something,
Hmm.
and so let's say it has to do with shipping, and it's getting it there fast, are they going to ship the customer's product who's giving offering the maximum amount of profit, or the one that's giving the least? Are you going to take your most creative ideas to the customer who grinds you into the floor on price?
Hmm.
Why would you give them intellectual property to give them an edge in the marketplace?
Hmm. But the relationship is already kind of tainted to begin with. Then it's not coming from a standpoint of likability and trust, and it's just like the whole carpenter, like measure twice, cut once. If you're a jerk, like I'm not even measuring, I'm just cutting and gluing later.
Well, so my answer to you on that one is, it's not really an answer, it's more of a feeling. If you feel like you have to take a shower after a meeting with a client, uh, I think you got dusty roads ahead of you.
Yeah. No, listen to your gut. Definitely. I think that's a big one that you can't sell your soul to the devil for everything, for anything, actually, not everything, for anything.
You may serve the devil and you may serve the Lord, but you're all going to serve somebody.
Well, listen, thank you for such insights, so great storytelling. We've kind of gotten a glimpse of your world and a walk down memory lane for all the the generations that have led to the now dollar store, painting a picture of my youth as well. But for those who want to learn more about you, Pat, some of the work you're doing, some of the books you've updated and you've published, where's the best way for them to find you and connect with you?
Patrick Tinney, sales author, drop me into any search engine and just stand back. I mean, this is probably about my. Yeah, well, it's true. It's the way it is. I've just this month, I think I'm going to do 4 podcasts, so I'm turning up
Okay.
everywhere. Um, Centroid Marketing is the name of the company. You just drop in Centroid and marketing, I show up. Just Patrick Tinney. By the way, LinkedIn, I'm pretty easy to find. My phone number is probably one of the most accessible phone numbers on the internet, and 20 minutes of my time is always available.
Nice.
At
Excellent.
my cost.
At your cost. Okay. Awesome. Well, listen, thank you so much for your insights, your wisdom, and just I think looking at negotiation from a different lens, and it doesn't have to be this real zero sum rule, zero sum game, and harsh. And it's just kind of people dealing with people, building trust, being transparent, being vulnerable. And I would say, doing business the way you would like to, have business done to you without feeling like you need to take a shower after.
Well, first of all, thank you for the engagement today. I feel quite honored knowing that I have a colleague who's heading over to Ireland very shortly to represent the red and white flag. Um, do you know if you really believe in the future of your career, you'll take the time to become better at what you do. It's what we do, Karen, is a craft.
Hmm.
It's
Mhm.
bigger than an undergrad. It's bigger than a master's degree. It's equal to a PhD. My grandfather was a stonemason. He built the pillars on the bridge that crosses between Hamilton and Burlington. He was involved in the
Mm.
construction of the Piggott Building in Hamilton. He was involved in the construction of the windows of Christ Church Cathedral across from the old Hamilton Spectator. It takes a lifetime to learn how to become a stonemason. It takes a lifetime to learn how to become a good negotiator.
Okay. Well, thank you, everybody, and enjoy, and we'll see you next time.